Dorothy Williams held her purse tight against her chest as she walked down the steps into the subway station. Her old knees hurt with each step, but she had made this trip many times before. At 72 years old, she was not afraid of the subway. She had seen much worse things in her life. The evening air was cool and most people were heading home from work. Dorothy had spent the day with her granddaughter Lisa, helping her with the new baby. It had been a good day, but now she was tired and ready to get home to her small apartment. The subway platform was not too crowded. A few people waited for the train, checking their phones or reading books. Dorothy found a spot near the wall and waited. She thought about her granddaughter and the sweet baby. Life was good, even though she missed her husband Henry every day. He had been gone for 3 years now, but she still talked to him sometimes, when she was alone. The train came with a loud noise and squealing brakes. The doors opened and people got off. Dorothy waited for them to pass, then stepped inside. She found a seat near the middle of the car and sat down with a small sigh. Her purse sat on her lap and she kept one hand on it. Inside was her wallet, some photos, and most important of all, the last picture she had of Henry in his army uniform. That picture was worth more to her than anything else in the world. The train car was mostly empty. A young woman sat near the front, typing on her phone. An older man in a business suit read a newspaper. Near the back, a man in a dark coat sat quietly. He looked normal enough, but something about him seemed different. Dorothy had learned to notice things like that during her years as a nurse in the army. Some people just had a different way about them. The train started moving, and Dorothy relaxed in her seat. She would be home in 20 minutes. She could make some tea and watch her favorite TV show. Maybe she would call Lisa to check on the baby one more time. At the next stop, a few more people got on. One of them was a young man who looked to be in his 20s. He had messy hair and wore old clothes that looked like they had not been washed in a while. His eyes moved around the train car quickly, looking at each person. Dorothy noticed this right away. She had seen that look before on people who were looking for trouble. The young man sat down a few seats away from Dorothy. He kept looking around, and his leg bounced up and down like he was nervous or excited about something. Dorothy tried not to stare, but she kept an eye on him. Her nurse training had taught her to watch people and notice when something was wrong. The train moved through. 2 more stops. Some people got off, some got on. The car was still not very full. The young man kept looking around and Dorothy saw him staring at her purse. She held it a little tighter. When the train was between stations, moving through the dark tunnel, the young man got up. He walked over to Dorothy and stood in front of her seat. Up close, she could see that his eyes looked strange, like he was not quite awake or not quite himself. "Hey, old lady," he said. His voice was rough and unfriendly. "Give me your purse." Dorothy looked up at him. She was scared, but she had been in scary situations before. During the war in Vietnam, she had worked in field hospitals where bombs were falling and people were dying. She had learned not to show fear even when she felt it. "No," she said simply. "This is mine." The young man looked surprised. Maybe he thought she would be an easy target because she was old and alone. He stepped closer to her. "I said, give me your purse, old woman. I'm not asking again." "And I said no," Dorothy replied. Her voice was calm, but her heart was beating fast. "You need to go back to your seat and leave me alone." The man in the dark coat at the back of the train had been watching this whole time. Dorothy noticed that he had put down whatever he was reading and was now paying full attention to what was happening. He looked ready to move, but he had not gotten up yet. The young man reached for Dorothy's purse. She pulled it away from him and held it tight with both hands. Inside that purse was the picture of Henry, and she would not let anyone take it from her. "Let go of it," the young man said, grabbing at the purse straps. Dorothy held on tight. "No, you cannot have it." The young man pulled harder, and Dorothy almost fell out of her seat. That was when the man in the dark coat stood up. He moved quickly but quietly, like he knew exactly what he was doing. "That's enough," the man said. His voice was calm but strong. "Leave her alone." The young man turned to look at him. "This is not your business, man. Walk away." "I'm making it my business," the man said. He walked closer, and Dorothy could see that he was not very tall, but he moved like someone who knew how to handle trouble. His dark hair was a little long and he had kind eyes, but there was something tough about him too. The young man let go of Dorothy's purse and turned to face the other man. "You want to fight me, old man?" "I don't want to fight anyone," the man said. "I just want you to stop bothering this lady and go sit down." But the young man was angry now. He swung his fist at the man in the dark coat. Dorothy had never seen anyone move so fast. The man caught the young man's fist, twisted his arm, and in just a few seconds had him on the ground. He did it so smoothly that it looked almost easy. "Stay down," the man said. "I don't want to hurt you." The young man tried to get up, but the other man held him down without much effort. That was when Dorothy noticed something strange. As the young man struggled, something small and shiny fell out of his pocket. It rolled across the floor of the train car and stopped near Dorothy's feet. She looked down at it. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before. It was about the size of a coin, but it was made of some kind of metal that seemed to glow with a soft light. Strange symbols were carved into its surface, symbols that did not look like any language she knew. The train was slowing down, approaching the next station. In the distance, Dorothy could hear sirens. Someone must have pressed the emergency button or called for help. The young man heard the sirens too. Suddenly, he seemed to wake up from whatever had been controlling him. He looked around confused, like he did not know where he was or what he had been doing. What happened?" he asked. "Where am I?" The man in the dark coat looked just as confused as Dorothy felt. He let the young man sit up, but kept watching him carefully. "You were trying to rob this lady," the man said. "Rob someone?" The young man looked horrified. "I would never. I don't remember. My head feels so strange." The train stopped, and the doors opened. Police officers ran onto the train car. The young man saw them and panicked. He jumped up and ran toward the doors. "Wait," the man in the dark coat called after him. "You dropped something." But the young man was already off the train and running through the station. The police chased after him, and soon Dorothy could hear their footsteps disappearing up the stairs. Dorothy bent down and picked up the strange metal object. It was warm to the touch, and the symbols on it seemed to move slightly, like they were alive. She showed it to the man who had helped her. When he saw it, his whole face changed. The color drained from his skin, and his eyes went wide with what looked like fear or recognition. "Where did this come from?" he asked quietly. "It fell out of that young man's pocket," Dorothy said. "What is it?" The man looked at her for a long moment, like he was trying to decide whether to tell her the truth. "Ma'am," he said finally, "I think we need to talk." The train doors closed, and they were moving again. Dorothy looked at the strange metal object in her hand, then at the man who had helped her. The other passengers had moved to different parts of the train car, giving them some space to talk. "My name is John Mitchell," the man said, sitting down across from Dorothy. "What's your name?" "Dorothy Williams," she replied. "Thank you for helping me back there. That young man seemed so angry, but then he acted like he didn't know what he was doing." John nodded slowly. "That's because he probably didn't know." "Not really." He looked at the metal object in Dorothy's hand. "Can I see that thing he dropped?" Dorothy handed it to him. John held it carefully, turning it over in his hands. The strange symbols on its surface seemed to glow brighter when he touched it. "This is what I was afraid of," John said quietly. "What do you mean?" Dorothy asked. "What is that thing?" John was quiet for a moment, like he was trying to decide how much to tell her. Dorothy had seen that look before on doctors when they had bad news to share. She waited patiently. Her years as a nurse had taught her that people needed time to find the right words. "Mrs. Williams," John said finally, "what I'm about to tell you might sound crazy, but I need you to listen carefully, because this is very important." Dorothy sat up straighter. "I'm listening." "That young man who tried to rob you was not acting like himself, was he? You noticed that, didn't you?" "Yes," Dorothy said. His eyes looked strange, like he was not fully awake, and when the police came, he seemed confused about what he had done. That's because this device was controlling his mind, John said, holding up the metal object. It's designed to make people more angry and violent. Someone has been putting these all over the city. Dorothy stared at him. That's impossible. How could a little piece of metal control someone's mind? It uses technology that doesn't come from Earth, John said. Mrs. Williams, I need to tell you something about myself. I'm not entirely human. Dorothy blinked. She had heard many strange things in her life, but this was new. What do you mean? I'm part human, but I also have some alien blood in my family line. My job is to watch for signs of alien activity on Earth. I work for a group that tries to protect Earth from outside threats. Dorothy looked at John carefully. He seemed normal enough, but now that she thought about it, there had been something different about the way he moved when he stopped that young man. He had been too fast, too smooth, like he was stronger than he looked. You're serious, she said. You really believe this? I know it sounds crazy, John said, but I've been tracking these devices for weeks. Someone has been placing them in subway stations, bus stops, and other places where lots of people gather. They're trying to make humans more violent. Why would anyone want to do that? Dorothy asked. To study us, John said. There's an alien group that wants to know how humans behave under stress. They're testing us to see if we're dangerous or if we can be controlled. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. She thought about all the strange things she had seen on the news lately. More fights on the subway, more road rage, more people getting angry over small things. She had thought it was just the way the world was getting worse, but maybe there was another reason. Let's say I believe you, Dorothy said. What happens now? Now we need to find out who's putting these devices around the city and stop them, John said. But Mrs. Williams, this could be dangerous. You don't have to get involved. I can take you home and you can forget this ever happened. Dorothy laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. Young man, I'm 72 years old. I was a nurse in the Vietnam War. I've seen people die and I've helped save lives. I raised 3 children by myself after my husband died in that war, and then I raised my granddaughter when her parents couldn't take care of her. I've been through dangerous times before. John looked surprised. You were in Vietnam? I was a field medic, Dorothy said. I worked in hospitals near the fighting. I've seen what happens when good people get hurt by forces they can't control. If someone is messing with people's minds and making them violent, then I want to help stop it. This isn't like anything you've seen before, John warned her. These aren't human enemies. Maybe not, Dorothy said. But if they're hurting people, then they need to be stopped. And you said yourself that young man wasn't acting like himself. How many other people are being controlled by these things? John pulled out a small device that looked like a phone, but it had screens and buttons that Dorothy had never seen before. He pressed some buttons and the screen showed a map of the city. Red dots were scattered all over it. Each red dot is one of these devices, John said. There are dozens of them, maybe more. Dorothy looked at the map. There were red dots near her apartment building, near the hospital where she used to work, near Lisa's house where the baby lived. My granddaughter, Dorothy said. She lives near one of those dots, and she has a new baby. The devices don't affect everyone the same way, John said. Some people are more sensitive to them than others. But yes, they could be dangerous to your family. Dorothy felt anger rising in her chest, but this was her own anger, not caused by any alien device. Someone was threatening her family, and that was something she would not allow. What do we need to do, she asked. John looked at her with respect. First, we need to figure out where these devices are coming from. I've been tracking them, but I haven't found the source yet. Someone is placing them around the city, but I don't know who or where they're operating from. Do you have any ideas? Dorothy asked. A few, John said. But Mrs. Williams, if we do this together, you need to understand that we'll be going up against something much more dangerous than that young man who tried to rob you. The people behind this have technology we can barely understand. I understand, Dorothy said. But I also understand something you might not think about. I've been living in this city for 50 years. I know people, and people know me. I have connections you might not have. John raised his eyebrows. What kind of connections? Other veterans, for one thing, Dorothy said. People who know how to keep their eyes open and how to stay calm in bad situations. Nurses and doctors who work in hospitals and see strange things. Police officers who've been wondering why there's been more violence lately. That could actually be very helpful, John said. The train was slowing down again. Dorothy could see through the windows that they were approaching her stop. This is where I get off, she said. What happens next? John thought for a moment. Can I trust you with something important? You can trust me, Dorothy said. John reached into his coat and pulled out a small communication device. It looked like a tiny phone, but it was made of the same strange metal as the device that had fallen from the young man's pocket. This will let us stay in contact, he said. If you see anything strange, or if you think someone near you is being affected by one of these devices, you can call me. Dorothy took the device. It was warm in her hand, just like the other one had been. How do I use it? She asked. Just press the center button and speak, John said. I'll hear you no matter where I am in the city. The train stopped and the doors opened. Dorothy stood up, holding her purse tight and putting the communication device in her coat pocket. John, she said before she got off the train, that young man who tried to rob me, will he be okay? I think so, John said. Once he gets away from the device, the effects should wear off. He probably won't even remember what happened clearly. Good, Dorothy said. He seemed like he could be a nice young man if someone wasn't messing with his head. She stepped off the train and turned back to look at John through the window. I'll call you tomorrow, she said. We have work to do. As the train pulled away, Dorothy walked up the stairs to the street level. Her mind was spinning with everything John had told her, but she felt more alive than she had in months. She had a purpose again, something important to do. When she got home to her small apartment, she made tea and sat in her favorite chair. She looked at the photo of Henry on the side table next to her. Well, Henry, she said out loud, looks like I'm going on another adventure. I hope you're proud of me. She could almost hear Henry's voice in her head, telling her to be careful, but also telling her to do what was right. That's what he would have done. Dorothy picked up her regular phone and started making calls. She had work to do, and she knew just the people to help her do it. Dorothy woke up early the next morning. She had not slept well because her mind kept thinking about everything John had told her. Alien devices, mind control, people being made to act violent against their will. It all sounded like something from a science fiction movie, but she believed John was telling the truth. She made coffee and sat at her small kitchen table. Through her window, she could see people walking to work and children going to school. They all looked normal, but now Dorothy wondered if any of them were being affected by those strange devices. She pulled out the communication device John had given her. It was still warm and still had those strange symbols on it. She pressed the center button like he had shown her. John, she said quietly. Are you there? A few seconds later, John's voice came through the device clearly. Good morning, Mrs. Williams. How are you feeling? I'm fine, Dorothy said. But I've been thinking all night. I want to help, but I need to understand more about what we're dealing with. What do you want to know? John asked. You said someone is placing these devices around the city. Have you seen who's doing it? Not exactly, John said. But I have some ideas. Can you meet me today? There are some things I want to show you. Dorothy thought about her day. She had planned to do some shopping and maybe visit Lisa and the baby. But this was more important. Where do you want to meet? She asked. Do you know Central Park? There's a bench near the lake by the boathouse. Can you be there at 10 o'clock? I'll be there, Dorothy said. After she hung up, Dorothy called her old friend Betty, who used to work with her at the Veterans Hospital. Betty, it's Dorothy. I need to ask you something strange. Have you noticed anything unusual lately? People acting more angry or violent than normal? Betty was quiet for a moment. Now that you mention it, yes. We've had more fights in the emergency room this month than we usually have in a whole year. and the patients seemed confused afterward, like they don't remember why they got so upset. Have you seen anything strange around the hospital? Any new equipment or devices that shouldn't be there? Dorothy, what's this about? Betty asked. Dorothy thought carefully about how to answer. I think someone might be doing something to make people more aggressive. I'm trying to figure out what's happening. That's a serious accusation, Betty said. But you know what? Yesterday I found something odd in the waiting room, a small metal disc stuck under one of the chairs. I thought it was just trash, but it had strange marks on it. Dorothy's heart started beating faster. Do you still have it? I threw it away, but I can check the trash. Dorothy, if someone is really doing something to hurt people, we need to call the police. Not yet, Dorothy said. Let me look into this more first. But Betty, can you do me a favor? Can you ask some of the other nurses if they've seen anything like that metal disc? Don't make a big deal about it. Just ask quietly. I can do that, Betty said. But Dorothy, be careful. If someone is really doing what you think they're doing, it could be dangerous. After she hung up with Betty, Dorothy called two more friends. One was Jack, a retired police officer who lived in her building. The other was Maria, who worked at the subway station near Dorothy's apartment. Both of them had noticed the same thing. More violence, more angry people, and both had seen small metal objects in places where lots of people gathered. By the time Dorothy left for Central Park, she was sure John was right. Someone was putting these devices all over the city, and they were affecting people's behavior. Dorothy found John sitting on the bench by the lake, feeding bread to the ducks. He looked up when she arrived and smiled, but she could see that he was worried about something. You look like a man with bad news, Dorothy said as she sat down beside him. I am, John said. I've been doing more research since we talked yesterday. The situation is worse than I thought. How much worse? John pulled out his strange device and showed her the map again. There were even more red dots than before. They're not just in New York, John said. I've been in contact with my colleagues in other cities. These devices are showing up in Los Angeles, Chicago, Atlanta, and at least 6 other major cities. Dorothy stared at the map. This is bigger than just one city. Much bigger, John said. Someone is running a coordinated experiment on human behavior across the entire country. But why? Dorothy asked. What do they want to learn? I think they want to know how humans react under stress, John said. How quickly we turn violent, how well we work together when things get bad, whether we can be controlled or if we'll fight back. Dorothy thought about this. It sounds like they're deciding whether we're dangerous to them. Exactly, John said. And depending on what they learn, they might decide to do something about it. A young man jogged past them, and Dorothy noticed he had earbuds in and was listening to music. He looked normal and happy, just exercising in the park. But now Dorothy wondered if there were alien devices hidden somewhere nearby, waiting to change his mood or make him do something violent. John, she said, I called some friends this morning. They've all seen these devices and they've all noticed more violence lately. John looked interested. What did they tell you? Dorothy told him about her conversations with Betty, Jack, and Maria. John listened carefully and took notes on his device. This is very helpful, he said. I've been working alone, trying to track these devices with my equipment. But you have something I don't have. What's that? A network of people who care about their community, John said. People who notice when things change and who want to help. Dorothy smiled. That's what neighbors are for. My people don't really understand that concept, John said. Where I come from, most beings work alone or in small groups. The idea of a whole community working together to solve a problem is unusual. Well, you're on Earth now, Dorothy said. And on Earth we take care of each other. John nodded. I'm starting to understand that. But Mrs. Williams, we need to be careful. If the people behind this realize we're tracking them, they might speed up whatever they're planning. What do you think they're planning? I'm not sure, John said. But I don't think this is just about studying human behavior. I think they're preparing for something bigger. Dorothy felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool morning air. Like what? Maybe an invasion, John said quietly. Or maybe they want to take control of human society from the inside. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the ducks swim on the lake. Dorothy thought about her granddaughter and the new baby. She thought about all the people in the city who had no idea that someone was experimenting on them. What's our next step? She asked. I need to find out where these devices are coming from, John said. Someone is making them and someone is placing them around the city. If we can find that person or group, we might be able to stop this. How do we do that? John thought for a moment. The devices need to be maintained and monitored. Someone has to check on them regularly. If we watch the locations where the devices are placed, we might see who's taking care of them. That sounds like a job for more than just 2 people, Dorothy said. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we need to organize, Dorothy said. My friends and I can watch different locations. We're older, so people don't pay much attention to us. We can sit in parks, wait at bus stops, hang around subway stations. Nobody thinks twice about old people doing those things. John looked at her with admiration. That's actually a very good plan. I learned a few things during the war, Dorothy said. Sometimes the best intelligence comes from people who know how to blend in and watch without being noticed. But Mrs. Williams, if we do this, we need to be very careful. The people we're looking for are not human. They have technology we don't understand, and they won't hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in their way. Dorothy stood up from the bench and brushed crumbs off her coat. John, I've been thinking about that all night. These beings, whoever they are, they're treating humans like lab rats. They're making people violent and confused and scared. They're hurting families and communities. She looked at him with determination in her eyes. I didn't serve in Vietnam and work as a nurse for 40 years and raise a family just to sit back and let someone hurt innocent people. Alien or not, they picked the wrong planet to mess with. John smiled, and for the first time since Dorothy had met him, he looked hopeful. In that case, he said, I think it's time to start fighting back. Dorothy nodded. Let's go make some phone calls. I have some people I want you to meet. As they walked away from the lake, Dorothy felt something she had not felt in years. She felt like she was part of something important again, something that mattered. Whatever these aliens were planning, they were about to learn that humans were much stronger when they worked together than when they were divided. And Dorothy Williams was going to make sure they learned that lesson the hard way. 3 days later, Dorothy sat in her living room with 5 of her friends. Betty had come from the hospital, Jack from downstairs in her building, Maria from the subway station, and 2 others she had called. There was Frank, who used to be a soldier with her husband Henry, and Rose, who worked at the post office and knew everyone in the neighborhood. John sat quietly in the corner, still looking a little uncomfortable around so many people. Dorothy understood that he was not used to working with groups, but he was learning. Let me make sure I understand this, Jack said. He was a big man with gray hair who had been a police officer for 30 years before he retired. You're telling us that aliens are putting mind control devices around the city to make people violent? That's right, Dorothy said. And we have proof. She had asked her friends to bring any strange metal objects they had found in the past few weeks. On the table in front of them were 7 small devices, all with the same strange symbols and warm glow. Betty picked up one of the devices. I found 3 more of these at the hospital after we talked. They were hidden under chairs in the waiting room behind vending machines, and one was taped under a table in the cafeteria. I found 2 at the subway station, Maria said. One was stuck to the bottom of a bench, and another was hidden behind a poster on the wall. Frank, who was the oldest person in the room at 78, held up a device. Found this one at the Veterans Center. Been wondering why some of the guys have been getting into more arguments lately. John finally spoke up. These devices work by sending out signals that affect the part of the brain that controls anger and fear. They make people more likely to fight and less likely to think clearly. Rose shook her head. Why would anyone want to do that? To test us, Dorothy said. To see how we react when we're pushed to be violent. They want to know if humans can be controlled. And what happens when they finish their test? Jack asked. John looked grim. That's what we need to find out, but I don't think the results will be good for humanity. Dorothy stood up and walked to the window. She could see people on the street below going about their normal lives. A mother was pushing a baby stroller. 2 teenagers were laughing about something. An old man was walking his dog. They all looked so peaceful, but Dorothy knew that hidden devices were trying to change that. "We've been watching the locations where these devices are placed," Dorothy said. "Has anyone seen anything suspicious?" "I have," Frank said. "Yesterday I was sitting near the Veterans Center pretending to read a newspaper. Around 2 in the afternoon a woman came by. She looked normal enough, but something was off about her." "What do you mean?" John asked, suddenly very interested. "She moved too smoothly," Frank said, "like she was floating instead of walking, and her eyes never blinked. I watched her for 5 minutes and she never blinked once." John pulled out his strange device and started typing on it. "What did she look like?" "About 30 years old, brown hair, wearing a blue dress. Pretty, but in a way that seemed too perfect, like a doll." "Did she do anything with the devices?" Dorothy asked. "She went straight to where I had seen the device hidden behind a bulletin board. She touched it for about 10 seconds, then walked away." John showed them his device screen. "I'm getting readings from that location right now. The device there is much stronger than it was yesterday." Betty leaned forward. "So these people, or whatever they are, they're making the devices more powerful?" "It looks that way," John said. "Which means whatever they're planning, they're getting ready to do it soon." Dorothy felt a chill of fear, but she pushed it down. Fear would not help them now. "Has anyone else seen people like Frank described?" she asked. Rose raised her hand. "I saw a man like that at the post office 2 days ago. He had the same, too perfect, look and the same strange way of moving. He asked me about the busiest times of day when the most people were there." "Did he touch anything?" John asked. "He walked around the lobby for a few minutes, touching the walls near where people wait. In line." John typed more information into his device. "I'm detecting devices at your post office too. Strong ones." Maria looked scared. "There was a woman like that at my subway station yesterday. She got off the train but didn't leave the station. She just walked around touching things, then got back on the next train." Dorothy sat back down. "So we have 3 confirmed sightings of these people in 3 days. They're definitely doing something to the devices. The question is what?" Jack said. "And when?" John stood up and walked to the window next to Dorothy. "I've been monitoring communications from my organization. There's been increased alien activity detected in several major cities over the past week." "What kind of activity?" Frank asked. "Ships in orbit that shouldn't be there, energy signatures that don't match any known human technology, and reports of people who look human but don't quite act human. Like the people we've been seeing," Dorothy said. "Exactly." Betty looked worried. "If these aliens are getting ready to do something big, shouldn't we call the government? The military?" John shook his head. "My organization works with some government agencies, but this situation is complicated. Some of the people in those agencies might be compromised." "What do you mean?" Rose asked. "I mean, some of them might be working with the aliens," John said. "Or they might be affected by the mind control devices themselves." Dorothy thought about this. "So we can't trust the authorities." "Not all of them," John said. "We need to be very careful about who we talk to." Frank laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Sounds like Vietnam all over again. Never knew who you could trust." Dorothy looked around the room at her friends. These were people she had known for years, people who had proven themselves to be trustworthy and brave. If she could not count on the government or the police, at least she could count on them. "So what do we do?" Jack asked. Dorothy had been thinking about this question since the meeting started. "We do what we've always done," she said. "We take care of our community." "How?" Maria asked. "We warn people," Dorothy said. "Quietly, carefully, but we warn them. We tell them to watch out for unusual anger or violent thoughts. We teach them to recognize when they might be affected by these devices. And we keep watching," Frank added. "Keep tracking these fake people and what they're doing." John nodded. "And we try to find their base of operations. They have to be coordinating all of this from somewhere." "I have an idea about that," Rose said. Everyone turned to look at her. The woman I saw at the post office asked about our busiest times, right? What if they're planning something during rush hour, when the most people are affected? That makes sense, John said. Maximum impact. But when? Betty asked. John checked his device again. Based on the pattern of activity I'm seeing, I think it will be soon. Maybe within the next few days. Dorothy felt her heart sink. A few days was not much time to warn an entire city. We need more help, she said. We need to reach more people. How do we do that without causing panic? Jack asked. Dorothy thought for a moment. We use our networks. Betty, you can talk to people at the hospital. Maria, you can warn the people who work at the subway stations. Rose, you know everyone at the post office and half the neighborhood. And I can talk to the veterans, Frank said. A lot of them are tough old guys who know how to handle trouble. What about me? Jack asked. You still have friends in the police force, Dorothy said. See if you can find officers who've noticed the increase in violence but haven't been affected themselves. Warn them quietly. John looked impressed. You're building a resistance network. That's exactly what we're doing, Dorothy said. And we're doing it the way humans have always survived tough times, by working together and looking out for each other. Over the next hour, they made plans. Each person would reach out to their contacts and try to identify more people who could help. They would set up a communication system using regular phones and meetings in safe places, and they would keep watching for the fake people who were maintaining the alien devices. As the meeting was ending, John pulled Dorothy aside. Mrs. Williams, he said quietly, I need to tell you something. I've been in contact with my supervisor and there's something wrong. What do you mean? Agent Collins, the person who's supposed to be coordinating our response to this threat, is telling me to stop investigating. He says the situation is under control and I should back off. Dorothy felt a cold feeling in her stomach. You think he's been compromised? I think so, John said. Which means I'm on my own. We're on our own. Dorothy put her hand on John's shoulder. No, you're not alone. You have us. John smiled, and Dorothy could see that he was beginning to understand what it meant to be part of a human community. Thank you, he said. I'm starting to think that's humanity's greatest strength. It is, Dorothy said. And these aliens are about to find out just how strong we can be when we work together. As her friends left that evening, Dorothy felt both scared and determined. The next few days would be dangerous, but she was not facing them alone. She had her friends, her community, and a growing network of people who were ready to fight for their city and their freedom. Whatever the aliens were planning, they had made one big mistake. They had underestimated the power of ordinary people who cared about each other. Dorothy was making breakfast when the communication device John had given her started beeping urgently. She pressed the center button quickly. Dorothy, we have a problem. John's voice came through, sounding stressed. The devices all over the city just got much stronger. Something big is about to happen. Dorothy looked out her window. It was early morning and people were starting their day as usual. But as she watched, she saw a man yell angrily at a woman who accidentally bumped into him. Across the street, two teenagers started pushing each other over nothing. I can see it from my window, Dorothy said. People are getting angry already. It's going to get worse, John said. I'm reading energy levels that are 10 times higher than before. Meet me at the subway station near your building. We need to find their control center today before they activate the final phase. Dorothy grabbed her coat and purse. As she left her apartment building, she could hear shouting from different directions. A car honked angrily at another car. Someone was yelling about a parking space. The devices were working exactly as the aliens had planned. When Dorothy reached the subway station, she found John waiting for her. He looked worried and tired, like he had not slept. How bad is it? Dorothy asked. Bad, John said. I've been monitoring the situation all night. The alien devices are coordinating with each other now, sending out stronger signals. By tonight, most people in the city will be affected. What's the final phase you mentioned? John showed her his device. The map of the city was covered in red dots, but now there were also large red circles around certain areas. "They're creating zones of maximum effect," John said. "Areas where the devices will be so strong that people will become completely violent and uncontrollable." Dorothy studied the map. Those zones include the hospital where Betty works, the Veterans Center where Frank goes, and the subway hub where thousands of people pass through every day. "And City Hall, the main police station, and the financial district," John added. "They're targeting the most important places in the city. Why? I think they want to create so much chaos that the government will lose control," John said. "Then they can step in and take over, claiming they're here to help restore order." Dorothy felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. Getting angry would not help anyone right now. "Have you heard from your friends?" John asked. "Betty called an hour ago," Dorothy said. "The hospital is getting crazy. They've had 15 fights in the emergency room since midnight, and it's getting worse. She's trying to warn the staff, but some of them are getting affected, too." "What about the others?" "Frank is organizing the veterans. Jack is trying to reach the police officers he trusts. Maria is warning people at the subway stations, but John, it might not be enough." John nodded grimly. "I know. That's why we need to find their base and shut down the whole system." "Do you have any ideas where it might be?" "I've been tracking the signals," John said. "They're all coming from somewhere underground, probably in the old subway tunnels that aren't used anymore." Dorothy remembered something. Maria mentioned that some of the older tunnels were sealed off years ago. The city uses them for storage now. "That could be it," John said. "Do you think Maria could show us how to get into those tunnels?" "I can. Ask her," Dorothy said. "But John, if we go down there, what are we walking into?" "I don't know," John admitted. "But I do know that we can't let them finish what they're doing." Dorothy called Maria on her regular phone. The subway worker answered. On the first ring. "Dorothy, thank goodness you called," Maria said. "It's getting crazy down here. I've had to break up 3 fights in the last hour, and people are getting angrier by the minute. Maria, I need to ask you something important. Do you know how to get into the old sealed tunnels? The storage tunnels? Why would you want to go down there?" "We think that's where the people behind all this violence are hiding," Dorothy said. "We need to stop them." Maria was quiet for a moment. "Dorothy, those tunnels are dangerous. They're dark and some of them flood when it rains. And if bad people are really down there—" "I know it's dangerous," Dorothy said. "But if we don't stop this, the whole city is going to tear itself apart." "Okay," Maria said finally. "I can show you a way in. But we need to be very careful." An hour later, Dorothy, John, and Maria stood at a locked door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" in the basement of the main subway station. Maria had brought keys and flashlights. "Beyond this door is a tunnel that connects to the old system," Maria said. "Some parts are still used for storage, but most of it has been abandoned for 20 years. John was checking his device. "I'm getting very strong readings from this direction." Maria unlocked the door and they stepped into a narrow tunnel. The air was cool and damp, and their footsteps echoed in the darkness. Dorothy stayed close to John, holding her flashlight steady. As they walked deeper into the tunnel system, Dorothy could hear strange sounds ahead of them. Not human voices, but something else. A humming noise like machinery, and underneath that, a sound like static from a radio. "We're getting close," John whispered. They came to a junction where 3 tunnels met. John checked his device and pointed to the tunnel on the right. "That way." As they moved forward, the sounds got louder, and then Dorothy saw light ahead. Not the warm light of electric bulbs, but a cold blue glow that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. John held up his hand, signaling them to stop. He listened carefully, then motioned for them to follow him quietly. They crept forward until they could see into a large underground chamber that had once been a subway platform. What Dorothy saw there made her gasp. The chamber was filled with alien technology. Strange machines lined the walls, covered in the same symbols they had seen on the small devices. Cables and wires connected everything together, and in the center of the room was a large device that pulsed with blue light. But what shocked Dorothy most were the people working in the chamber. There were at least 20 of them, all moving, with that same too-smooth motion Frank had described. They looked human, but something was wrong with their eyes and the way they moved. Artificial beings, John whispered. They look human, but they're actually robots controlled by the real aliens. Where are the real aliens? Dorothy asked quietly. John pointed to a raised platform at the far end of the chamber. 3 tall figures stood there, but they were definitely not human. They were thin and pale, with large eyes and long fingers. They wore clothing that seemed to be made of the same material as the devices. One of the alien beings was speaking to the others in a language that sounded like music mixed with static, John translated quietly. They're saying the final phase will begin in 2 hours, he whispered. They plan to activate all the devices at maximum power during rush hour, when the most people are on the streets and in the subway. What will that do? Maria asked. Create total chaos, John said. People will become so violent that the city will collapse into riots and fighting. Then these aliens will reveal themselves as peacekeepers and take control. Dorothy watched the aliens and their robot helpers preparing their equipment. She thought about her granddaughter Lisa and the baby, about Betty at the hospital, about Frank at the Veterans Center, about all the innocent people who had no idea what was about to happen to them. We have to stop them, she said. How? Maria asked. There are 25 of them and 3 of us. John was studying the chamber carefully. The main control device is in the center of the room. If we can destroy that, it should shut down all the devices throughout the city. Can you get to it? Dorothy asked. Maybe, John said. But I'll need a distraction, something to draw their attention away from the control center. Dorothy looked around the chamber, thinking. She had spent her whole life solving problems and helping people in crisis situations. This was just another crisis, even if it involved aliens instead of wounded soldiers or sick patients. I have an idea, she said, but you're not going to like it. What is it? John asked. I'm going to walk in there and talk to them, Dorothy said. Both John and Maria stared at her like she had lost her mind. Dorothy, they'll kill you, Maria said. Maybe, Dorothy said. But they're studying human behavior, right? They want to understand how we react under pressure. Well, I'm going to show them something they don't expect. What do you mean? John asked. Dorothy smiled, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the young nurse who had worked in dangerous field hospitals during a war. I'm going to show them that humans don't always react to threats with violence, she said. Sometimes we react with courage, compassion, and the willingness to sacrifice ourselves for others. John looked at her with admiration and fear. Mrs. Williams, this is incredibly dangerous. Everything worth doing is dangerous, Dorothy said. John, can you disable that machine if I can get their attention? I think so, John said. But Dorothy... No buts, Dorothy said firmly. Maria, I need you to go back and warn as many people as you can. Tell them to stay home, stay calm, and help their neighbors do the same. What about you? Maria asked. Dorothy checked her watch. It was almost rush hour. In less than 2 hours, the aliens would activate their plan and the city would tear itself apart. I'm going to go have a conversation with some aliens, Dorothy said. And I'm going to teach them something about humanity that they didn't. Dorothy took a deep breath and walked out of the shadows into the alien chamber. The robot-like beings noticed her immediately and started moving toward her, but one of the real aliens held up a long, thin hand to stop them. Fascinating, the alien said in perfect English. A human has found our operation. Dorothy walked slowly toward the center of the chamber, her hands visible and empty. She was scared, but she had been scared many times before and had learned not to let fear control her actions. My name is Dorothy Williams, she said in a clear, calm voice. I'm 72 years old and I've lived in this city my whole life. The 3 aliens looked at each other with what Dorothy thought might be surprise. The one who had spoken before stepped forward. I am Coordinator Vex, the alien said. You should not be here, human. This area is dangerous for your species. Everything is dangerous for my species right now, Dorothy said. Because of what you're doing to us. Behind the aliens, Dorothy could see John moving carefully along the wall of the chamber. The robot beings were all focused on her, which was exactly what she had hoped for. What we are doing is necessary, Coordinator Vex said. We are studying your species to determine if you are a threat to galactic peace. And how are you studying us? Dorothy asked. By making us violent? By forcing us to hurt each other? We are observing your true nature, another alien said. When your inhibitions are removed, humans reveal themselves to be savage and destructive. This proves you are too dangerous to be allowed to develop space travel. Dorothy felt anger rise in her chest, but she forced herself to speak calmly. You're not seeing our true nature. You're seeing what we become when we're being controlled and manipulated. The difference is irrelevant, Coordinator Vex said. Your species responds to stress with violence. This makes you unsuitable for contact with other civilizations. Dorothy looked around the chamber at all the alien technology, at the robot beings, at the three aliens who thought they understood humanity. She thought about everything she had seen in her long life. The wars, yes, but also the people who had helped each other during those wars. The violence, but also the kindness. The fear, but also the courage. You want to see human nature? Dorothy said. I'll show you human nature. She reached into her purse and pulled out the photograph of her husband Henry in his military uniform. The robot beings moved closer, thinking she might have a weapon, but Dorothy just held up the picture. This is my husband, she said. He died in Vietnam 30 years ago. He was a soldier. But do you know what he did in the war? He carried wounded people to safety. He shared his food with children in villages. He wrote letters home for soldiers who couldn't read or write. Coordinator Vex looked at the photograph with its large, dark eyes. Your mate was a warrior. This supports our conclusion about human aggression. No, Dorothy said firmly. He was a healer. Yes, he carried weapons. But that's not what made him human. What made him human was his choice to help others, even when he was scared and far from home. John had reached the central control device. Dorothy could see him working on it, but she needed to keep the alien's attention focused on her for a few more minutes. You've been watching us fight, Dorothy continued. But have you been watching us help each other? When there's a fire, humans run toward it to save strangers. When there's a flood, we rescue people we've never met. When someone is hurt, we stop what we're doing to help them. These behaviors are aberrations, the third alien said. Your species' primary response to conflict is violence. Only when you force us to be violent, Dorothy said. But even then we resist. Even when your devices are making people angry, they're also trying to protect their families and communities. She looked directly at Coordinator Vex. You say you're studying us, but you're not. You're torturing us, you're making us act in ways that go against everything we believe in, and then you're judging us for it. The alien was quiet for a moment. What would you have us do? Your species is developing technologies that could make you a threat to others. Talk to us, Dorothy said simply. Ask us what we want. Work with us instead of experimenting on us. That's what humans do when we want to understand each other. Behind the aliens, John held up his hand, signaling that he was almost done with the control device. Your proposal is illogical, Coordinator Vex said. Humans cannot be trusted to tell the truth about their intentions. Dorothy laughed, surprising herself and apparently the aliens too. You think we can't be trusted? You've been hiding underground, controlling people's minds, and conducting secret experiments on an entire city. Which one of us is being dishonest? For the first time, the aliens looked uncertain. They exchanged glances and spoke to each other in their musical language. Dorothy pressed her advantage. You want to know what humans are really like? Look around this city right now. Yes, people are getting angry because of your devices, but they're also helping each other. They're calling friends to check on them. They're staying home to protect their families. They're choosing love over anger, even when you're trying to force them to be violent. John suddenly stood up from behind the control device. Dorothy, get down! She dropped to the floor as John pressed something on the alien machine. There was a bright flash of light and a sound like thunder. All the alien devices in the chamber went dark, and the humming noise stopped. The robot beings collapsed like puppets with their strings cut. The three real aliens staggered, looking shocked and confused. The network is down, John called out. All the devices in the city should be shutting off. Coordinator Vex looked at Dorothy with what she thought might be respect. You risked your life to save your species, even though you knew we could kill you. That's what humans do, Dorothy said, getting back to her feet. We protect each other, and your companion sacrificed his mission to save you, even though completing his task was more important than one human life. Dorothy looked at John, who was walking toward them. He's learning to be human. The aliens spoke to each other again in their musical language. Finally, Coordinator Vex turned back to Dorothy. We have observed something unexpected, the alien said. Even under the influence of our devices, many humans chose to help rather than harm. They resisted our manipulation and acted according to their own moral principles. That's what I've been trying to tell you, Dorothy said. We came here, believing that power and aggression were the most important traits for a species to possess. Coordinator Vex continued. But we have seen that humans possess something else, something we do not fully understand. What's that? Dorothy asked. The ability to choose compassion even when it would be easier to choose violence. The willingness to sacrifice for others, even strangers. This is unusual. John reached them and stood next to Dorothy. What happens now? Coordinator Vex looked at both of them. Now we must reconsider our evaluation of humanity. Your species may be more suitable for galactic contact than we initially believed. What about your experiment? Dorothy asked. It will end, the alien said. We will remove our devices and return to our ships. But first, we have a proposal. What kind of proposal? John asked. We would like to establish formal contact with your species. Not as conquerors or controllers, but as... What is the human word? Neighbors. Dorothy smiled. I think that would be a good start. Over the next several hours, the alien devices throughout the city were shut down and removed. People slowly returned to normal, confused about why they had been feeling so angry and aggressive. Most of them never learned about the alien experiment, but they noticed that their communities seemed stronger somehow. Dorothy returned to her normal life, but with some changes. John visited her regularly, bringing news from his organization and from the aliens who were now working with Earth's governments to establish peaceful relations. Betty, Frank, Jack, Maria, and Rose became part of a quiet network of people who watched for signs of unusual activity and helped their neighbors when problems arose. They never talked publicly about what had happened, but they stayed ready to help if their city ever faced danger again. A month later, Dorothy was riding the subway home from visiting Lisa and the baby when she saw a young man who looked upset and angry. For a moment, she wondered if there might be another alien device nearby. But then she realized the young man was just having a bad day, the way people sometimes do. Dorothy got up and sat next to him. Are you okay? She asked gently. The young man looked surprised. I just lost my job. I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, Dorothy said, let's figure it out together. I know some people who might be able to help. As the train moved through the tunnel, Dorothy thought about what Coordinator Vex had said. Humans had something unusual, something the aliens didn't understand at first. It wasn't just the ability to choose compassion over violence. It was the understanding that no one has to face their problems alone. That, Dorothy thought, was what made humans truly strong. And it was what would keep them strong, no matter what challenges they faced in the future. The train reached her stop, and Dorothy helped the young man make a plan for his job search. As she walked home, she smiled. The aliens had tried to study humanity by making people fight each other. Instead, they had learned that humanity's greatest strength was helping each other. It was a lesson Dorothy